a lot of people, the word philanthropy conjures a mental image of elderly, wealthy, and white. And studies show that image isn't far from reality. According to a 2020 study, 92% of foundation presidents and 83% of full-time staff members are, in fact, white, a factor that can affect what initiatives get funding and how much they receive. But after a year that has laid bare persistent inequities in everything from healthcare outcomes to criminal justice, leaders of philanthropic organizations are reassessing how and to whom they are lending their support. Joining us now are Liz Thompson, founder and president of the nonprofit Cleveland Avenue Foundation for Education, Tawa Mitchell, senior program officer at the MacArthur Foundation and co-chair of the Chicago African Americans in Philanthropy leadership team, and Monique Brunson-Jones, president and CEO of Forefront, Illinois' statewide association representing grant makers and nonprofits. Thanks to all three of you for joining us. Monique Brunson-Jones, let's start with you, please. What is unique about the Black philanthropic approach?
Thank you for having me. It is so unique for Black representation because what we do, the approach, is more of a content and context expert. The approach is near and dear to a community that we live in, an experience that we've had. And so we want to partner in a way that shows how we've experienced that and the value of the people who are currently trying to tackle the issue. It's very much a way of living.
Liz Thompson, how did you and your husband, Don Thompson, become involved in philanthropy?
Well, Brandis, it's something that we've done all of our lives. I mean, you know, in our community, philanthropy is a big word, and we always thought of it as giving back. So it's something that was in our DNA from our family. And it's something that we always wanted to do if given the resources to be able to do it. And we always knew that education would be the key lever that we would want to pull in order to be able to give back. And so it's just something that we've been committed to virtually all of our lives.
And I want to come back to that focus on education in a little bit. But Tawa Mitchell, in roles like yours at the MacArthur Foundation, does your identity inform your approach to the job?
Every day, I think as a native Southsider and Chicagoan, I bring my full self to the work that we do at the MacArthur Foundation on the Chicago commitment. Thinking about growing up in South Shore, which was such a rich and wealthy community of mostly African Americans who gave their time, their talent, their treasure to their community and working hard every day, but often in our neighborhood, lacking the resources, the amenities and other attributes that people in other communities take for granted. So funding community and economic development and having that background, often I center my neighbors, my community in the work that we do in trying to achieve our goals. And less than 2% of funding nationally goes to Black communities, Black-led organizations, according to data that we have available. And so it's representation matters, if only to change those statistics and change our approach to giving.
On that note, Monique Brunson-Jones, how can diversity in philanthropy help to advance racial equity goals?
You know, it gives us an opportunity to really look at our root causes. And so people who are, as you noticed here with Liz and Tawa, engaged in the way that we are, it gives us an opportunity to look at the approach and create spaces for power dynamic shifting. It really gives us an opportunity to look at how we are making sure that we're sustainable with our grant making or sustainable with our giving, and we're using the dollars to move the needle forward racially based on where we know our communities are oppressed, where we know we are getting the biggest bang for our buck, if you will, and engaging in a way that gives us the opportunity to do long-term sustainability work in our communities.
Tawa Mitchell, how has the last year, both with regards to the pandemic as well as this racial reckoning, affected the way organizations are giving?
I think there is now a recognition that we are facing a twin pandemic of both systemic racism in addition to the COVID-19 pandemic. And this racism has been a scourge on our society and something that has affected us long before this disease. And I think philanthropic organizations are now recognizing that they can't tackle one without the other. And so shifting, not just making statements about intent, but shifting grant making to get to the communities that are in need the most is something that all of our foundations are really striving to do. And I think one of the things that's unique about Chicago African Americans or in philanthropy or CAPE is that it's an opportunity to bring all of these great ideas together, foundations, private, public, large and small, coming together in forums to discuss best practices and how to ensure that we're getting the money to the communities, to the neighborhoods where it's needed most.
And Liz, in December 2020, the Cleveland Avenue Foundation, you all launched the 1954 Project, obviously a nod to the 1954 Supreme Court Brown versus the Board of Education decision. But that project raised $100 million to support Black leaders in education over the next 5 years. And you mentioned that you knew that you wanted to focus on education in your philanthropy. Why education in particular?
There's been such a rich tradition of valuing education in the Black community for hundreds of years. You know, so many people risk their lives just to be able to learn how to read as a means to freedom, if nothing but freedom of the mind. And so there has been this incredible tradition of valuing education. For my husband and I, we met at Purdue University. Education was our pathway towards success. And so we knew that for many other young people like us, it would be the same. That journey would be the same for them. And so while we're on the path to raising $100 million, we're not quite there yet. We know that valuing the leaders in education, Black leaders in education, will be key because there's so many statistics, Brandis, that cite when you have a Black educator in the classroom, in the school building as superintendents, the stats for young people increase in the positive ways, so many of them. And so we decided to focus in that area for better outcomes for all children. And in fact, we have our inaugural event coming up this Wednesday, the 28th at 11 a.m. Central Time, where we hope you will come and meet the inaugural cohort of our 1954 leaders, luminaries, as we're calling them.
And congrats on that event, that inaugural event. Monique, in about 45 seconds, how can the current systems be made more welcoming to Black philanthropists?
You know, it's important for us to start looking at our policies and procedures. And we talk about institutional philanthropy. I came to this role with a background as a philanthropist and as a nonprofit worker, looking at how we invite that Black philanthropist to the table. For instance, the amount that's needed to start a donor advised fund. Those institutional parameters need to change. How we engage in communities and how we hire and how we promote in Black philanthropy and blue institutions need to be really thoughtfully looked at, and power dynamics need to shift majorly in order to make the changes that we need to see in our communities.
Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. A lot to think about. My thanks to Monique Brunson-Jones, Liz Thompson, and Tawa Mitchell for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.